So I was out at the bar one night when I saw the ugliest person I've ever laid eyes on. I know you think you've seen ugly, but this guy was just a notch below the rest. He had these crooked yellow teeth, his eyes had giant purple bags underneath them, and he had pockmarks so deep that it looked like he had just gotten out of a 12-hour nap sleeping on a bed of gravel. This guy was genuinely hideous to look at, truly a toad of a human being. I had gone to the bar that night looking to talk to some girls. Even though that was my intent, I ended up spending most of the night nursing my drink in the corner of the room. And as the night goes on, Mr. Ugly talks to girl after girl. They're all laughing, you can tell he's flirting, and some of them actually flirt back. Now, here I am, scared to go talk to a girl, and here he is, ugly as ever, just chatting the night away. Now, there is no possible way that I am as ugly as the ugliest person I've ever met. So how is it possible that I ended up not talking to any girls and Mr. Ugly ended up talking to every girl in the bar? That night, Mr. Ugly had very high self-esteem and I had very low self-esteem. My name's Damian Barton, and today we're going to talk about self-esteem, and more importantly, we're going to talk about how to raise it. Before we can get into how to raise our self-esteem, we need to look at what it is. Self-esteem is your evaluation of your own worth. In Dr. Abraham Maslow's theory of the hierarchy of needs, he describes two kinds of self-esteem. The first kind is defined as respect from other people. The second is defined as respect for the self. Self-esteem is dependent on both how we are treated by others and how we treat ourselves. Self-esteem is based on recognition. We look for cues from other people to tell us what we're good at. If you're told, wow, you're so good at painting, that's a cue from your environment that you're a good artist. The outside world is telling you you're good at art. But we also get those cues from within ourselves. If you take notice of how much better your paintings are this month compared to last month, you also feel like a good artist. Self-esteem is made up of both recognition from others and recognition from yourself. You could have 4 yachts, 16 luxury cars, and be the CEO of a thriving company, and still consider yourself worthless. Just because you're getting external validation doesn't mean that you'll have high self-esteem. If you're not internally recognizing your achievements, it's almost as if it didn't happen. On the flip side, you could have a crappy car that barely works, work a minimum wage job, and be totally unappreciated by the people around you, and have super high self-esteem because you treat yourself with so much respect and admiration. Maslow goes on to say that satisfaction of the self-esteem need leads to feelings of self-confidence, worth, strength, capability, and adequacy of being useful and necessary in the world. But thwarting these needs produces feelings of inferiority, weakness, and helplessness. Having high self-esteem allows us to do things we wouldn't otherwise be able to do with low self-esteem. If you think that you're capable of something, you will try to do it. And if you don't think you're capable, why would you risk it just to ultimately fail? When I was at the bar, I didn't go up to those girls because I thought I would fail. I thought about how I've been putting on weight, that zit that just showed up this morning, about how I don't have any gum, so my breath smells really bad, so I'm probably just going to repulse any girl that I talk to. It's not like I've never been called good looking by someone, but that's not what I was focusing on. I was focusing on everything that was wrong with me. But Mr. Ugly, with his high self-esteem, wasn't thinking about his looks at all. He was focusing on what a good listener he is, how funny he can be. He thought about all the times in the past that he's been successful talking to girls. He had confidence in his ability to talk to girls. So even though, if you looked at both of us, I should have had the higher self-esteem, he had so much recognition for what he was good at and what he could offer. He had higher self-esteem, which allowed him to try something without feeling like he was going to fail. It's also important to keep in mind that self-esteem isn't static. It moves around. You may have high self-esteem one day and low self-esteem another. It changes day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. On the days where you got the only A in the entire class, you're going to have higher self-esteem than on the days when you failed the test. The basketball player will feel higher self-esteem playing basketball than he will learning to play badminton. There are areas of life we are more competent in than other areas. You have higher self-esteem when you feel competent and like you belong. To have high self-esteem, we need to stop keeping up with the Joneses. No matter what you do, if you keep comparing yourself to people who are ahead of you, you will always be unhappy. It's the guy with the 2-story yacht who hates his boat now that there's a 3-story yacht docked nearby. And he has a 2-story yacht! When we compare ourselves to other people, we welcome insecurity, because no matter how good you aren't as good as the next guy. It's very hard to cultivate good self-esteem when you keep undercutting yourself with social comparison. Ultimately, comparing yourself isn't only bad for your self-esteem, it's inaccurate. Let's say you see a guy with a nice car, and you think to yourself, why is my car such a hunk of crap? My life sucks compared to that guy's. If you're making a social comparison, you are judging an entire person's life by one or two things. That guy could go home in that nice car to a marriage where his wife and mother-in-law both genuinely hate him and continually tell him so. Is a nice car really worth that life? Another great way of raising your self-esteem is identifying and focusing on your strengths. This is a big subject that'll end up getting its own episode, but just to introduce the subject, let me ask you a question. Will you be more successful if you cultivate your strengths, or should you spend the time working on your weaknesses? The creators of the strength movement within positive psychology believe that our path to success relies on recognizing what we're good at and then embracing it. The greatest heights we reach aren't made by improving weaknesses. We excel when we embrace what we're already good at. Flavor Flav would make an awful librarian. If he spent his entire life trying to develop a love for the Dewey Decimal System and speaking quietly, he'd be clamping down on his natural strengths. And ultimately, he'd prevent himself from becoming the best version of who he could be. Be like Flavor Flav. If you think poorly of your own abilities, you're going to be dependent on the outside world to reassure you that you have worth and have something to offer. But if you have high self-esteem, if you have a strong internal belief in yourself and your abilities, the opinions of others become less and less important, because they could be wrong about you. They could be seeing only a tiny sliver of what you have to offer the world. You could try to feel good about how attractive you are by waiting for compliments from others, or you can compliment and recognize the things in yourself that make you attractive. You have infinitely more control in how you talk to yourself than how other people talk to you. Respect from others can be lost. It's fragile, but respect from yourself, that can be cultivated and maintained to create a strong foundation of higher self-esteem. It's time for the Takeaway Tape. Dr. Guy Winch has this really great exercise for when you need to raise your self-esteem right after it's been lowered. Make a list of qualities you have that are meaningful in that context. So for example, right after I got home from striking out at the bar, and I'm sitting in my bed thinking about how unattractive I am, I should make a list of qualities that make me a good relationship prospect. I'm funny, I'm smart, I'm fun to talk to. Really map out the strengths that you're not paying attention to. The more you focus on these, the more you'll associate these qualities with the activity that's messing with your self-esteem. If I think about how I'm funny and a good listener, it'll make me feel more confident when it's time to go talk to girls, which will lead to better outcomes down the line. Pick one of those qualities and write a paragraph about why that quality is valuable to yourself and could be appreciated by the people around you. By really expanding on it and spending some time to really think and savor what you're good at, you're going to reverse the direction of that downward spiraling self-esteem. Do this exercise anytime you're feeling like your self-esteem took a hit. So in summary, self-esteem is dependent on both how we are treated by others and how we treat ourselves. Self-esteem isn't static, it moves and changes depending on the situation. When we compare ourselves to others, we undercut our self-esteem. We can get higher self-esteem by recognizing and focusing on our strengths instead of fixating on our weaknesses. We should also focus on cultivating internal validation. And after our self-esteem takes a hit, we can challenge that self-esteem destroying inner voice with Dr. Winch's strength listing exercise. Join us next week when we talk about the key to feeling more alive: zest. If you like this video and want to be notified anytime a new video is released, hit that subscribe button. Also, if you liked the show and want more information, go ahead and follow us on social media. There's a bunch of extra content like infographics of some of the takeaway tips, as well as some fantastic mental health quotes from many of the most notable names in the field. The links are down in the description. If you like this episode and want to learn more about anything we talked about, I included the sources in the description below. I also included a link to a great TED Talk where Dr. Winch goes more in depth in his explanation of self-esteem and emotional first aid. Definitely worth checking out. Thank you for taking care of each other and taking care of yourself. I'll see you next week.